Hello everyone, Raven here. Wasn't sure until now if I really was gonna be that anxious to play Dragon Age. Well, what was Dreadwolf and now the Veilguard. I now know I've got to play it. Not necessarily because I'm so excited about it, but because now I understand. Now I understand what exactly it is that's made everybody so against the more recent BioWare games. Now, before I go into this, I'm going to discuss what I feel really is making it so that people don't like the direction it's taking, number one. And number two, I want to go through just the characters that are shown in the trailer. There's not a whole lot it shows, but there's enough to make it something to talk about. And also, understand, as I've said before on this channel, and I hope you guys can understand, I am taking a very different perspective than most people would. Because what gets me with video games is I've had some that literally changed me. I'm not talking about ones that help you through a tough time. That's important, that's good. But for me, they actually taught me something. It actually changed me. And because of that, I look at it very much through my worldview, through my Christian perspective. So I know a lot of people are going to hate this, and I don't care. I'm sick of the political correct nonsense, and that's what makes me both worried and pleased. Now, the reason I wanted to state that first was not just so that you guys are aware, but also because I realize now that has a huge part to play in why people are so upset with the direction BioWare's been taking. Watching people's reaction to this new teaser, I realized they're not upset because it's not as dark. They're upset because the style and the tone is not as dark. What this is our world has come to a point where morals, for the most part, are being thrown out. There are no morals. Which means the quote-unquote darkness can't come from the themes anymore. There's little you can do to get that in by the morals in order to really have something of that feel, of that battle between good and evil. You have to do it through the tone and the style. That's why people have been so upset, because it's that conflict, that tension of trying to defeat this evil, of being in fear of this evil and standing up to it, that I think draws people in. The problem is, with the way our world's going, you can't just do that by the story. You can't just do that by the themes. You've got to do it by the tone, by the feel of it. Because now, all morals in our current day and age is determined by your reaction, your emotions. It's why they're so concerned with being politically correct today. And so now I've understood that's been the problem. Now let me say, this trailer, I will agree, it does look a little more cartoonish than it should. However, that's the only thing in there that really makes me a little bit disappointed. Doesn't really worry me, it just makes me a little disappointed. And I'll explain a little bit more of why it doesn't disappoint as much in a bit. But understand, that's what I really am coming at this from the angle of. It's just seeing how, where's this story going to go? What themes are they going to bring in? Because that's too often the problem, is the themes aren't going to really be the focus anymore. It's the feel, the emotion. And I hope that isn't the way it sticks. So, let's start looking at the characters. First one we see, of course, is Varric, but they seem to be labeling all of your companions, and they don't put a label on Varric, so he doesn't seem to be one of your teammates in this, or squad mates. He seems to be somebody who's just part of the story, but a little more on the side than he's been in the other games that he's been in. I'm okay with that. I've always liked having Varric on the team. I always enjoyed the chat with him, and some of what he would say on the side, his lines were always good, but I think it's kind of being going to be nice to have him more as just this side character who's kind of sitting a little bit away from the centerpiece. The next character we see is Harding. Now, they do label Harding as though part of your squad, and I'm very pleased because I was hoping for this. I liked her a lot in Inquisition. I thought she was one of the better characters because she had that mixture of both strength and, let's just say this, she just was humble. She was not at all arrogant. She seemed just as nervous as she was brave. I'm glad to see her in this, and you can tell already both of them seem to have grown a bit. So I'm wondering how much is going to be changed, but I'm hopeful. Now, the next one, I'm going to assume, you say it, just Neve, if Neve is the name of the character. I am trying not to get my hopes up, but there's one thing about this I think is neat. Neve is labeled as a detective. I think that could be really good, because that doesn't just feel like something you'd normally expect as far as a role of somebody in a Dragon Age game, as far as your companions, at least. That doesn't quite feel like the norm, so there could be a neat twist to that, and that also implies there's a bit more of mysteries you're trying to figure out in this, which is great. So that gives me a little bit of hope, but I can't say too much because they barely show much. So setting the style of it aside, hopeful but hesitant. The next one is Lucanus. I'm assuming is how you say it. He, I have mixed emotions. Number one, he does very much remind me of Blackwall, just in his appearance. Although he looks a little younger, not much, but a little. I'm just hoping that doesn't mean he's going to be a lot like Blackwall was. I hope there's significant difference, but it does make me a little nervous. At the same time, his title, The Mage Killer, that could be interesting, because that right there is where you can bring in some of the more questionable motives. Does he just want to kill all mages? Does he only come after certain ones that are going too far? Where's he drawing the line? That's the question. And within that, it also could do a lot with his character in the story. So this could be really interesting what they do with him. Or it could be rather disappointing. It could go either way. And now we come to the one that seems to be, said Balara, called the Veil Jumper. Mostly I'm just nervous, because this to me looks like a sillier, less weird, and more silly version of Sarah from Inquisition. That's just the impression I get from this. From everything of her expression, her look, everything. I'm concerned because this could go down that road of the woke. That's just the impression I get from what we see. So I don't want to jump to too many conclusions, but this one makes me nervous. This looks like the one could just be the comic relief. And I really hope not. I don't want to get my hopes up, but maybe this could be something very unique, very different from anything I'm expecting. If so, great. Then we have Emmerich. Emmerich, to me, gets me a little hopeful. Again, set aside the style of the trailer, because I'm hoping it's not as cartoony in the actual game. Because that's the one downside I'll say with him. But if you set that aside, you send the general look of him, his age, everything, the kind of character he seems to be, oh, that could be a really interesting character. I'm going to say right now, everything about him makes him look like a darker mage. He does very much look like he'd be one of the ones from Tevinter. And if so, there could be a lot of interesting stuff that happens with that. So I'm going to be hopeful, but try not to get my hopes too high. But that could be good. Then we have Devon. Now, this is just a warden. That tells us nothing. Really. I see nothing here to give me any impression of what to make of him. I don't know yet. I'm very up in the air and unsure whether to be optimistic or pessimistic on this one. I'm just going to say I'm completely neutral because this tells me nothing. For the last one, before the main character, this one, when I first saw the trailer, threw me way off. Apparently, this is Tosh. Now, the way the font was done, at first I read it as saying trash. I'll assume that was supposed to be an A, not an R, and it was just the way the font was done that made it look like it could be an R. Tosh, I'm very up in the air. There's so many different ways to take this. But one thing I will note right away, and I'm not gonna assume too much with this because inconsistency too often comes in to play. The more and more the games go, as things continue, new people are coming in making it. I don't know that they're going to be very consistent. But Tosh has full horns, which tells me she is Qunari. She's not Tel-Vashoth. But I don't want to assume because who knows what excuse they might have for that. But if she is, that could be interesting. That was one of my minor complaints when it came to Dragon Age Inquisition, is I don't think Iron Bull really fit well as a true Qunari. That was kind of a good and bad thing. Good because it did kind of fit with where his story went, which was neat. But it was bad also in that it was as though too much development happened before we entered into the story with him. So I'm not sure which way this is going to go, but I would be more hopeful if she really is Qunari and not Tel-Vashoth than if, turns out, she's Tel-Vashoth. They just wanted to have the horns there anyway. And lastly, our main character. This is the part that has me hopeful. This is something we've known for a while and has kept me eager to see what happens. Because as I said from the beginning of this video, as I was explaining, what people have been disappointed in is that it doesn't have that dark tone. But I think they still have dark themes at times, dark topics. This could take it even further, and I'm hopeful. Because one big distinction between Origins, Dragon Age 2, and Inquisition is with Inquisition, you didn't really have much of a choice when it came to the end of it. Origins, you could go down a really dark road. You could support your enemy, Logan. You could go down that road of like witchcraft and dark things. Or you could stay moral, give yourself up, be a sacrifice, that kind of thing. Dragon Age 2, it was very much, do you support the mages or the Templars? That was a little bit more gray, but it still had the conflicting choices. Inquisition didn't have any of that. And I think part of the reason it didn't was because as the Inquisitor, it's like you had to stay as this, leader. Partly, I think, because of the DLC, where they were going to go with that. But with this kind of character, you could probably go either way. So maybe they'll go back to the kind of thing they had at the end of Origins, where you have that kind of choice. Where you really do have more dark themes. And that, if done right, maybe that could help. Makes me a little bit hopeful. I don't know. Depends on what they do. So I'm anxious, not because I think this looks great. I'm anxious because it could be, but mostly because I want to see how people react. I want to see, okay, just how empty have people gotten as far as morals? What is the conflict in this going to be? Where are people going to stand in it? What are they going to see as evil and dark? What are they not? So I'm definitely going to be trying to cover this what I can. Like I've said before, I do this channel just as a side note, just something fun I like to do on the side. And I was thinking, I don't know if I'd cover much of Dreadwolf. Now I feel more certain I'm going to want to simply because of the way people might react. So we'll see what they put up on Tuesday with the gameplay. I don't know if that's going to be something I'm going to have as much to talk about, but I probably still will do something about it. We'll see when the time comes. I'll see you guys then. God bless.